Do you want to know what is causing the Earth's climate to change? Have you been reading articles that suggest the climate is changing very rapidly, and are you concerned that this may affect you and your loved ones? If so, this video is for you, because we're going to discuss the science of climate change and what it might mean for you and your loved ones. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Lou Del Monte, the host of Savvy Life Strategies, where we post a new video every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1 Eastern Standard Time. I invite you to subscribe and click the notification bell to get more videos just like this. Now, let me start off by saying, why should you listen to what I have to say regarding the climate? Well, it turns out I'm a physicist and a scientist. And I have done quite a bit of reading. I've been very interested in this area. I've authored 4 books on science, and I'll list them below, and a 5th book is coming out in November. So I'm fairly well versed in the area. And I want to share with you what I know and what the experts are saying. So what I'm going to do is what I do in my books, and that is try to make it easy to understand for the average person with a high school education or even less. But I want to make it easy. And that was one of Einstein's principles, that if you really knew the subject, you could make it easy to understand. Now, you may not agree with me. That's fine. I can respect that. And be respectful in your comments. If you disagree, that's fine. However, be respectful, no profanity, no attacks on anyone, and I'll let the comment through. You may wonder, what is it that changes the climate on Earth? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's the sun. The sun, the heat and light from the sun, is what is the primary factor that influences our climate. So anything that affects the amount of light and heat reaching the Earth from the sun will affect our climate. Let me give you a simple example. In the tropics, they get more light and more heat from the sun, so they're warm. The polar caps, on the other hand, get less light and less heat from the sun, and they're frozen. Now, there are many more factors that are necessary, such as having a good gravity to hold in the atmosphere and things like that. However, the primary thing on Earth that influences our climate is the sun. And anything that changes or interferes with the sun reaching the Earth will influence our climate. So let's look at what could those changes be. We'll start with natural causes. Let me give you some examples of natural causes. One are volcano eruptions. When a volcano erupts, you can get as much as billions of billions of tons of earth thrown into the atmosphere. That earth, those particles, will prevent the sunlight from penetrating. If a supervolcano were to go off, for example, the people that didn't die from the supervolcano eruption itself would likely perish because the Earth would be put into a new ice age. What killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago was a meteor impacting the Earth. Now, the meteor itself didn't kill all the dinosaurs, but the resulting ice age really did. It did them in. Now, this next example may be hard to believe, but the sun actually varies. The amount of light and heat from the sun will vary from decade to decade. And we've gone through periods where there's been what they call a solar lull, less heat and light coming from the sun. And that's happened, for example, 300 years ago, we had a mini ice age. It started in 1645 and ended in 1715. And that was primarily due to the amount of light and heat that came from the sun. Now, you can look at this, and I know I've got some comments from my last video on climate change that there was a mini ice age that occurred from about the 1300s to the 1700s. And that's true. It started in the 1300s. But it had a bimodal distribution, means that there were two periods where it was very pronounced. One period was in the 1300s, and the second period was the one I just told you about, was from roughly 1645 to 1715. So the amount of light coming from the sun will vary just based on the sun's natural variation. And now another thing that varies, and you may not have heard this before, but it's true, that the Earth's orbit will actually vary in relationship to how it goes around the sun. And minor variations in the Earth's orbit will influence the climate. So that too is a factor. Now, taken together, the biggest single factor, natural factor that we have to be concerned about is a lull in the sun's solar activity. Well, now we're coming to the actually contentious part of this video. What are the man-made causes of climate change? Now, I know that many people don't agree with this. However, I believe it. As a scientist, I've looked at the data, and to me it's very compelling. And the number one cause is greenhouse gases, and primarily carbon dioxide. Now, I've seen a lot of comments on my other videos that say, well, you know, the carbon dioxide has been higher back 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and all that. Listen, the bottom line on that is that in recorded history, the last 400,000 years that humans have walked the earth in recorded history, the carbon dioxide has not gone above 300 parts per million. Now, since 1950, it's spiked. It's gone up to now 400 parts per million. That's the first time in recorded history it's done that. And it's on its way to 500 parts per million. Now, the World Health Organization is saying at 500 parts per million, carbon dioxide itself is a danger to humanity. Now, you may disagree with that. You may say, well, look, I go take the subway and the carbon dioxide is higher in the subway. And that may be true. And it may be true that when you're by an exhaust of a car, that the carbon dioxide is higher in that vicinity. But if it's always at 500 parts per million, if every breath you take is 500 parts per million in the atmosphere, then it becomes a danger to human life, according to the World Health Organization. Well, I know that was contentious. And here's another contentious point. What else could influence the climate of the Earth that's man-made? Well, a nuclear war. If we have a nuclear war with any adversary that has close parity in terms of their nuclear weapons, such as Russia or China, then the amount of nuclear explosions, detonations, will throw so much of the Earth and of these nuclear particles up in the air, radioactive particles in the air, that it will not only hurt you from the standpoint of the radiation and the fallout from that radiation, but from blocking the sun itself. And they call that a nuclear winter. So this idea that we can win a nuclear war with a capable adversary, I just don't buy it, because I believe any significant exchange will be a threat to humanity itself by blocking the sunlight and putting us into a nuclear winter. Now, I know you're going to say, well, that's all very cheery information, Lou. Thanks a lot. What do I do with that? Well, it turns out there are things we can do to help ourselves. And first, world governments need to get together, and they have, under the United Nations, and say, look, we have to tackle the emission of greenhouse gases. And that was happening under the Paris Climate Accord. Now, we recently, President Trump decided we should pull out of that. And I won't get into the politics of that. I'm not a politician, I'm a scientist. And basically, that the facts are that governments around the world are concerned about climate change that's caused by human activity, namely the burning of fossil fuels and carbon dioxide. And that's what the Paris Climate Accord was all about. I believe that that is something that we should reconsider, and from what I've heard, President Trump is reconsidering it. I don't know if we'll re-enter it. However, various governments and independent states are taking action to try to mitigate the emission of greenhouse gases. And I think that's the right direction. We can do something, and a lot of governments and at the state and local level are doing something. And we ourselves, as individuals, we can do something to lower our carbon footprint. In other words, don't burn as much fossil fuels in one way or another that results in these emissions that ultimately scientists are saying, and this was studied back in the 60s and pretty definitively proven, that greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide will trap in the heat and cause global warming. While that may be contentious, and I know I'm going to get a lot of comments on that one, however, keep your comments civil, and I'll approve them. It's okay to disagree with that. Just don't use profanity, because I have to delete those. And don't do any ad hominem attacks on anyone, myself, or any of the other commenters. People are permitted to believe and comment as they see fit. Look at the facts and formulate your own opinion, and then give forth a measured, a thoughtful comment. While that's contentious, the next one isn't that contentious, and that is that the sun goes through periods of less solar activity and more solar activity. They're called solar cycles. And we're heading, based on the latest data, we're heading for a lull in the sun's normal activity. This lull will be such that in 2030, we'll only be getting about 60% of the light and heat we're getting now. Now that, I'm not sure I believe all of that, but it's enough to make me concerned. And I would, as a citizen, and especially if I were a leader of a state, or president, etc., I would look at the data. I would get my scientific advisors to take a look at it. Because if that happens, we're headed, along with a lot of other factors, we would be headed for a mini ice age. And that's something we can prepare for. We can stockpile food, we can stockpile energy, and then we could, in effect, weather the storm. The next thing that we could do is stop talking about a winnable nuclear war. I don't think there is a winnable nuclear war with any nations that have parity with the United States in terms of their weapons. Even if it's, like, as in the case of China, they have about 600 nuclear weapons. If we do any kind of an exchange with a nation like that, it's really bad news for humanity. The chance of humanity surviving that kind of nuclear exchange, with the amount of radiation thrown in the air and the blocking of the sunlight by the Earth being thrust up into the upper atmosphere, the potential of humanity surviving that is low. So when I hear someone talking about, well, there's a potential that we could win a nuclear war, I don't think so. I think the science says something quite different, that it's unlikely that humanity itself would survive from any full-out nuclear exchange. So we need to stop talking about a winnable nuclear war and start talking more about how do we get along with one another on this planet. We all share one common goal, and that is we're all on the same planet. And that goal is that we need to survive as a species. So this idea of having any kind of a nuclear exchange is wrong. It's ludicrous. The bottom line is any exchange, any significant exchange of nuclear weapons by one power to another will result in probably the extinction of humanity for reasons I've already stated. I know this hasn't been a cheery video, but it's information I wanted to share with you. And if you found this information informative, If you yourself felt that you got some value out of this video, then I invite you to subscribe for more videos like this. Click the notification bell, that way you'll know as soon as a video comes out, and give it a thumbs up so that other people know that this is a valuable video and that they should watch it. And I respect all opinions, so it's up to you. Take a look at the data that I provide and formulate your opinion and comment as you see fit. Well, until we have a chance to talk again, stay savvy, live well.